today may be the first day that we don't trade on either the pandemic, the lockdowns, or the Federal Reserve. Suddenly this Hong Kong thing has sort of come out and sent stocks there 5.5%. Our futures, they're not tumbling. They're down about 170 points right now. But certainly, once we come out of the pandemic, and we will, whenever that is, we are still going to be facing a world where the Cold War between the United States and China appears to be heating up. How will that affect long-term investment strategies?
Well, Brian, I think a little more perspective on what's happening today in Hong Kong. Since Hong Kong was turned back over to China 23 years ago, local Hong Kong officials have been trying to pass Article 23 of their mini constitution, which is basically a sedition act. But in 23 years, local Hong Kong officials have not been able to garner local support for that. So clearly Beijing has finally lost patience here, and they are unilaterally, apparently, with Hong Kong official support, going to pass what is basically a sedition act. Now, and to get to your question, how does that impact long-term investing, the relationship with the United States? Hong Kong has some, when you were talking with Eunice in the earlier block, you mentioned that Hong Kong's one of the biggest financial centers in the world. And in fact, Hong Kong has some most favored trading status with the United States that's even above what mainland China has. So, the U.S. has some options here as to how they might retaliate to this, and it's related to trade. And ultimately, I guess we could see, world trade suffering from that.
Well, you are a well-known face to CNBC, but you're also a former naval submarine officer. So I think you've got a little bit of the idea, the general sense of geopolitics. And everything, of course, has been focused on the pandemic and the lockdowns, as it should be. But if you're investing out for 3 years, 5 years, 20 years, whatever it might be. The pandemic, like all others, will eventually end. We know that. We don't know when, but we know that it will end. But that doesn't free us from looking at the world post-pandemic and thinking, okay, what kind of a world are we going to be in? And the conflicts with China do not appear to be backing down anytime soon. I would imagine we've got to put that at least somewhat in our thinking on how we invest.
Well, absolutely. It has to be factored in, and a continued trade war with China, which seemed to be abating earlier this year. Certainly brings down world GDP, but at the same time, just to focus in a little bit more on your comments there about the pandemic ending, I would certainly think that we're going to see a V-shaped recovery out of this. The pandemic has deferred production and consumption. We haven't lost it. Bank of America came out with a similar report a couple days ago, and bull markets, and most viewers may be surprised about this, they start during recessions, which we're in. We may have started the next bull market on March 23rd when the S&P hit its current lows of 2237.
Well, the key is how many of the 36+ million unemployed are going to be back to work in 6 months, whether that will be 33 of the 36 or 20 of the 36. Ultimately, that's going to be one of the deciding factors. I mean, are we going to go into a recession? If so, for how long? What do you see in sort of your economic crystal ball?
Well, even if we do have this V-shaped recovery that I mentioned, and B of A mentioned as well, they had even given that in their report. They even said the bottom of this economically is going to be worse than we thought. But in some ways, that sets up for easier comparisons going forward. If you look at company by company, companies reporting their second quarter earnings right now. Excuse me, they're reporting their first quarter earnings right now, and they're basically getting out all the possible bad news they can have. And why are they doing that? Because that sets up for easier comparisons going forward. The same can be true on a macro basis for the economy as a whole.